Ryan Mercer was 2 weeks away from marrying Emily Foster when both she and his identical twin brother Liam vanished without a trace 10 years later. A DNA match revealed a secret so devastating it rewrote everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and betrayal. 2 weeks before the wedding, Ryan Mercer was a man on the brink of everything he'd ever dreamed of. At 31, he had a stable career in real estate, a beautiful Victorian home near Burlington, Vermont, and the love of his life, Emily Foster, ready to walk down the aisle. The venue was booked, the guest list finalized, and the florist had just confirmed the delivery of hundreds of white lilac, Emily's favorite. Their relationship had survived college years, career struggles, and the ordinary trials of life. What stood ahead seemed like nothing more than a beautiful ceremony followed by a new beginning. Ryan's twin brother Liam was the best man. Identical in appearance but opposite in personality, Liam was the adventurous one, a former photojournalist who, 500 spent years traveling and living out of a backpack. While Ryan had built a life of structure and stability, Liam chased adrenaline, rarely staying in one place long. But through every phase of life, the brothers remained close. Ryan trusted Liam more than anyone and had always assumed he would be by his side no matter what. The bond they shared was unshakable, tested through childhood fights, teenage breakups, and even a near-death hiking trip in their 20s. Ryan never doubted for a second that Liam would be there, front and center, on his wedding day. In the days leading up to the wedding, friends and family began to arrive. Emily's parents flew in from out of state. Ryan's childhood buddies trickled into town. The energy was light, filled with laughter and anticipation. Emily, though a bit anxious, seemed happy. She had just finished her final dress fitting and spent hours organizing last-minute details. Ryan could tell she was tired, but she brushed it off as typical pre-wedding nerves. Liam, as usual, provided comic relief and managed to lift everyone's spirits. He had a way of reading the room and saying just the right thing to diffuse tension. 3 days before the ceremony, Liam surprised Ryan with a weekend getaway, a low-key bachelor party at a quiet lodge near Lake Willoughby. It wasn't the kind of raucous event most grooms would expect, but it was exactly what Ryan wanted: a few drinks, a fire pit, old friends, and peace. Emily stayed behind in Burlington, saying she had a few things to finish up with the caterers and her hairstylist. She hugged Ryan goodbye, told him not to get too drunk, and laughed as Liam jokingly promised not to let Ryan get kidnapped. The lodge was rustic but comfortable. 8 guys piled into 2 large cabins. They spent the first evening grilling steaks, drinking beer, and sharing stories from high school. The conversation turned nostalgic, and for a while Ryan felt like a teenager again, carefree and hopeful. Liam stayed close to Ryan the whole time, occasionally stepping away to take mysterious calls, which no one really questioned. He'd always been the type to juggle multiple side gigs or check in with old friends around the world. No one thought anything of it. That night, everyone turned in late. Ryan crashed in the main cabin, exhausted but happy. When he woke up the next morning, sunlight was pouring in through the thin curtains. The lodge was quiet. At first, Ryan assumed the others were still asleep or had gone for a hike. He made coffee and waited. Slowly, the others emerged, groggy and hungry. But when Liam didn't appear by noon, concern crept in. At first, the guys joked about it. Maybe he'd met someone. Maybe he'd gone for one of his legendary solo photo walks. But Liam's phone went straight to voicemail. His car was still parked outside, but he wasn't in his cabin and none of his gear was missing. When Ryan called Emily to check in, her phone also went unanswered. His stomach tightened. He tried again and again, still nothing. By mid-afternoon, panic had fully taken hold. Ryan called Emily's parents, who hadn't heard from her since the previous night. Her car was missing, and no one had seen her at the house she'd been staying in. The coincidence of both Liam and Emily disappearing on the same day was too much to ignore. Ryan contacted the local authorities and a search was quickly launched. The police treated the case with urgency, especially since it involved two adults vanishing without explanation. Helicopters scanned the surrounding forest near the lodge, divers searched the nearby lake, and dogs were brought in to track scents. Emily's car was eventually found abandoned on a side road about 15 miles from the lodge, doors locked, no signs of a struggle inside. Her phone and purse were gone. Surveillance footage from nearby gas stations and intersections revealed nothing useful. For the first few days, Ryan remained hopeful. Maybe they had gotten lost. Maybe something had gone wrong, but they were still alive. He even allowed himself to believe they might return with some reasonable explanation, a misunderstanding, an accident. But as days stretched into weeks, the hope that once burned in his chest began to turn cold. The wedding was called off, guests were sent home. The church stood empty on what should have been the happiest day of Ryan's life. He didn't sleep for days. He could barely eat. Reporters hovered outside his home. His phone never stopped ringing. Detectives questioned him again and again. Had Emily shown signs of distress? Had Liam seemed different lately? Was there a fight, a secret, anything unusual? Ryan answered the same way every time. No, no, and no. When the official search was paused after 3 weeks, Ryan refused to stop. He created missing persons flyers, coordinated search parties, and started a blog that chronicled every theory he encountered. Hundreds of emails poured in from strangers across the country. Some claimed sightings, others offered psychic visions. A few even accused him of murder. Ryan didn't care about the rumors. All he wanted was the truth. Every night he stared at a photo of the three of them, taken just a week before, Liam with his arm around Emily, Ryan standing beside them with a beer in his hand, all of them smiling. That smile haunted him now. Something had happened. He knew it. And if no one else would find out what it was, he would. In the months that followed, Ryan's life became a blur of unanswered questions and fading hope. The police had done all they could. After an initial burst of activity, interviews, and searches, the investigation hit a wall. There were no leads, no ransom notes, and no bodies. With nothing to go on, the case slowly slipped from the headlines and into cold case files. Ryan was left alone with the silence. He withdrew from everyone. Friends stopped calling, unsure of what to say. His parents, heartbroken themselves, tried to support him, but he barely returned their messages. The house he had bought with Emily in mind felt like a museum of lost dreams. Her belongings remained untouched. Her hairbrush on the bathroom counter, the shoes by the door, the wedding dress in the garment bag, all reminders of a future that had evaporated overnight. Speculation filled the vacuum. Online forums latched onto the case, some treating it like a mystery novel. Theories ranged from the plausible to the outrageous. Some believed Liam had harmed Emily out of jealousy or rage. Others were convinced Ryan had uncovered an affair and lashed out. The most popular theory was that Liam and Emily had run away together. This idea festered, especially since they had both vanished without signs of struggle. Ryan hated that theory the most. To him, Liam was the one person who had never betrayed him. And Emily, she was kind, loyal, honest. The thought that they might have chosen to leave him behind felt more painful than any tragedy. But the doubt lingered. Every day he replayed conversations, gestures, glances. Had he missed something? Were there signs he had ignored? Ryan stopped working. Real estate felt meaningless. Instead, he poured all his energy into the search. He hired 3 different private investigators over the next 2 years. Each promised breakthroughs but found nothing concrete. They followed tips from other states, investigated people from Emily's past, even tried to trace Liam's travels before the disappearance. the trail always went cold. Eventually, money ran low. Ryan sold his house and moved into a small apartment outside Montpelier. He lived frugally, spending most days researching cold cases, missing persons databases, and trying to make sense of the forensic details in the original police reports. He requested files through Freedom of Information laws and built a wall of documents and maps in his living room. Pins and strings connected locations, timestamps, and witness statements. It became his world. Birthdays and holidays passed unacknowledged. On what would have been their first wedding anniversary, Ryan drove to the lake lodge and sat outside the cabin for hours, hoping for a sign. None came. After 5 years, even the private detectives stopped calling. The world had moved on, and Ryan remained suspended in that single week in October. He wasn't searching for closure anymore. He was searching for reason, anything that could explain how two people could vanish together without a trace, and how someone who had never hurt anyone could be left in their wake, permanently broken. Ryan had grown accustomed to disappointment. Every lead ended in silence. Every promising clue faded into nothing. But then, nearly 10 years after Liam and Emily disappeared, something changed. A simple email arrived in Ryan's inbox one morning from a DNA ancestry site he had almost forgotten he deregistered with. He had submitted his DNA out of boredom the previous year, never expecting anything meaningful to come from it. But this message was different. It said there was a close match, a child. The platform indicated a possible biological relationship, parent, uncle, or half-sibling. The child was listed as living in Oregon with a guardian named Anna Lewis. Ryan stared at the screen, frozen. He didn't have a child. There were no unknown siblings. His only brother Liam had vanished nearly a decade earlier. The only explanation that made sense, and none of it made sense, was that the child was Liam's, but with who? The answer was impossible to ignore. He paid for upgraded access, contacted the service, and requested more data. The more he read, the clearer it became. The boy's DNA was a 50% match to his own. It meant either he was Ryan's son, which he knew he wasn't T, or he was Liam's. That left only one person who could be the mother, Emily. The possibility hit Ryan like a landslide. If Liam and Emily had disappeared together and then had a child shortly afterward, it meant everything he feared might have been true. Not only had they left him, they had started a new life together. But why had they never reached out? Why had they vanished so completely? He immediately contacted a private investigator he had used before, providing the guardian's name and the small Oregon town listed on the profile. Within days, the investigator confirmed that Anna Lewis did exist, at least on paper. Her Social Security record only went back 8 years. Before that, there was no trace of her. Public records revealed she lived in a modest, single-story home outside a small town in Central Oregon. Satellite photos showed a woman who resembled Emily coming and going, always with a young boy. She kept to herself, rarely interacted with neighbors, and avoided town events. There were no known relatives, no digital footprint beyond the essentials. Ryan couldn't look away from the images. The boy looked exactly like Liam had at that age, the same eyes, the same shape of the face. It was undeniable. Ryan booked a flight to Oregon, heart pounding with every plan he made. After a decade of torment, he was about to get answers he had stopped believing would ever come. He didn't know what he would find or what he was even hoping for. Closure? Truth? An apology? He wasn't sure anymore. But he knew he couldn't look at that boy's face and walk away. Whatever the truth was, he had to see it for himself. When Ryan arrived in Oregon, the air felt heavier than he expected. The town was quiet, the kind of place where strangers stood out. He rented a car and drove slowly past the address the investigator had given him, a modest blue house at the edge of a cul-de-sac. The front yard was overgrown, the mailbox slightly tilted. A bicycle rested against the porch railing. He parked a block away and watched from a distance, his heart pounding harder with every passing minute. A woman stepped out onto the porch. She wore sunglasses, a long sweater despite the warm day, and had her hair tied back in a loose bun. Even with the changes, even with the distance of time, he recognized her. It was Emily. She moved differently, slower, guarded, but there was no doubt in his mind. Moments later, a boy came out behind her, chatting and pulling on her hand. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. He was looking at his nephew. Ryan didn't approach them. Instead, he went straight to the local police station. There, with shaking hands, he explained the situation. The officers listened carefully. Given the missing persons report still technically open in Vermont, they contacted state authorities and confirmed the details. It didn't take long to verify identities. Fingerprints matched. DNA confirmed everything. Emily Foster, missing for nearly 10 years, was alive and living under the name Anna Lewis, and the boy was indeed Liam's son. Emily was brought in for questioning. At first, she refused to speak, but after several hours, she finally broke her silence. Her voice was quiet, her eyes distant, as she unraveled the truth that Ryan had been chasing for so long. She explained that 2 weeks before the wedding, she found out she was pregnant. It was Liam's. She and Liam had been involved in a brief, impulsive affair. One night, one mistake, and everything changed. At first, she thought about telling Ryan, about coming clean. But Liam convinced her that the fallout would destroy everyone. He had always been persuasive, always knew what to say. In a panic, they made a decision to leave. That night at the lodge, while everyone was sleeping, Liam and Emily slipped away. They had already planned the route, already packed some things. They drove west with cash, used fake names, and settled in a remote town where no one asked questions. Emily said she always felt guilty, always looked over her shoulder. But Liam kept promising it was the right thing, that they'd find peace. 4 years later, Liam died in a hiking accident. Slipped off a cliff. His body was found, but no one connected him to the past. Emily, left alone with a young child and no identity, took on a new name and never looked back. Until now. She claimed she never meant to hurt Ryan. She cried when she said his name. But none of it changed what she had done or the decade of silence that followed. Ryan finally had the truth, but it didn't feel like justice. It felt like the end of a dream he never woke up from. Ryan sat in the police station-esque quiet waiting room long after Emily's confession had ended. The truth had come in waves, sickening, overwhelming, undeniable. He had envisioned this moment countless times, but reality felt stranger than any of the theories he had built over the years. There was no sinister plot, no violent end, no grand conspiracy. Just fear, betrayal, and the quiet unraveling of the people he had once trusted most. He didn't speak to Emily that day. There was nothing left to say. She was not charged with a crime. There had been no kidnapping, no fraud that could hold up in court. Her disappearance had been voluntary. She had vanished to protect a secret she couldn't bear to face. The police had confirmed that Liam had died in a hiking accident near Mount Hood, his remains identified under a false name. His death certificate had been issued under the alias he used in Oregon. The past had been buried alongside him until the DNA test unearthed everything. Ryan was given the option to meet the child. The boy's name was Matthew. He had Liam's bright eyes, Ryan's crook smile, and the quiet thoughtfulness that neither of them had fully grown into. Ryan stood in the doorway of the social services building, unsure if he could go through with it. But when the boy looked up and smiled, something broke inside him. He sat down, introduced himself simply as Ryan, and listened as Matthew told him about school, his favorite books, and how he liked to ride his bike around the cul-de-sac. Ryan didn't tell him who he was, not yet, but he knew the time would come. The boy had lost his father without ever knowing who he really was. Maybe now he could at least know the man who had loved his father like a second self. The days that followed were quiet. Ryan stayed in Oregon a little longer, mostly keeping to himself. He visited Liam's unmarked grave, a small stone with a fake name, and left a photo of the three of them from years ago. He stood there for a long time, remembering the boy they used to be, the brother who had stood by him through everything until he didn't. When Ryan finally returned to Vermont, it was with a strange sense of peace. The pain didn't disappear, but the emptiness had changed. The questions that had tormented him were answered, even if those answers hurt. He reopened his old blog and wrote one final post, detailing the story for the few followers who had stayed. It was a farewell, not just to the mystery, but to the version of himself that had been frozen in time for so long. He didn't know what would come next. Maybe he would keep in touch with Matthew. Maybe not. But he knew now that the truth had a weight of its own, and that carrying it was lighter than carrying the unknown. 10 years of silence were over. The past had finally let go,